Well, for more on this, let's speak to Kyron Huigens, who's a professor at the Cardozo School of Law and a former prosecutor. He joins us now from New York. Mr. Huigens, this whole impeachment process, as laid out in the Constitution, is based on whether the president has committed treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Does the memo that we've seen today indicate any of that?
Yes, it does. It actually pretty clearly indicates bribery. If you look at the readout of that, you have to understand Mr. Zelensky is president of a relatively poor, small country that's under active attack from Russia. Mr. Giuliani was sent to Ukraine months ago to encourage the Ukrainian officials to investigate Mr. Biden. They actually did and found nothing, but Mr. Giuliani has made several trips. So in the transcript, what Mr. Zelensky says is, first of all, yes, Mr. President, Ukraine will be your best friend, Mr. President. We're with you 100%, Mr. President. And then he says, we have met with Mr. Giuliani and we will meet with Mr. Giuliani again. And then the president says, that's good. Mr. Giuliani is a respected man in America, which he's really not. And furthermore, I'll have my Attorney General, Mr. Barr, call you on this matter. So in context, there's no question that Mr. Zelensky is desperate for aid of any kind from the United States. Mr. Trump is the most powerful man in the world and can supply Ukraine with help in counteracting Russian aggression. And in context, when Mr. Trump says, yes, thank you for looking into this, what he's saying is, we have an agreement, thank you. He doesn't say, well, the aid will be forthcoming, but in context, he certainly doesn't have to do that to show that there's an implicit understanding and an agreement with Mr. Zelensky.
Well, there has been a lot of talk about quid pro quo and this aid package that you're referring to, whether or not you can infer from the conversation that President Trump is potentially threatening to withhold that aid to Ukraine. But putting that aside, let me ask you about this part, where he asks Zelensky for a favor, and then let me quote directly, he says, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Putting the aid package aside, is just that request for a favor to investigate the son of a political rival, would that be enough for it to be a misdemeanor?
Well, it would be enough to be bribery, which is what's in the statute. As I said, Mr. Trump is the most powerful person in the world. Whether he mentions the $400 million or not, the United States, at Mr. Trump's word, can do any number of things to help Ukraine. If you look at the transcript, Mr. Zelensky is desperate. It's yes, sir. We're with you 100%, sir. Ukraine will be your best friend, sir. He is desperate for help. Mr. Trump doesn't have to say anything until he's satisfied Mr. Zelensky understands the situation, and he says, I will have Mr. Barr call you. You will meet again with Mr. Giuliani, which Zelensky had already promised to do. And so the $400 million is really a side issue. Of course, there's no express quid pro quo. In that situation, given what Zelensky is saying, that is clearly implicit.
Kyron Huigens there, a professor at the Cardozo School of Law and a former prosecutor. Thank you for joining us and your insights on Al Jazeera, Mr. Huigens.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, plenty